Ex-husband unexpectedly appears at ex-wife's doorstep. What shocking truth does he reveal? Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. It's been years since Emma's life had shifted away from David, her ex-husband. The memories of their broken marriage had faded into the background, replaced by her new routine and a calm life. But everything changed one quiet afternoon. Emma was in her living room, sipping her coffee when she heard a knock on the door. A knock she didn't expect nor wanted. It was David, standing there, as if the past years had been nothing. Emma froze for a moment, her heart racing. The last time she had seen him was during their painful divorce. The man she once shared everything with had become a stranger, and now he was back. His face seemed unchanged, but there was a certain tension in his posture that Emma couldn't ignore. She opened the door slightly, unsure of what to say or do. Emma. David's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. We need to talk. It's important. Emma stood in silence, her mind racing. Why was he here now? What could possibly be so important that it couldn't wait? She stepped aside, allowing him to enter, but she kept a safe distance. As David stepped inside, Emma noticed how much time had passed. The man who once shared her life now felt like a distant memory. She motioned for him to sit, still unsure of what this unexpected visit was all about. David hesitated for a moment, then looked her in the eyes. There's something you don't know, he began, his voice serious. Emma's heart skipped a beat. What could he possibly have to say after all these years? The weight of his words hung in the air, and Emma could feel the tension building. She sat down, her eyes never leaving him, waiting for him to reveal whatever shocking truth had brought him back into her life. David looked at Emma, his face serious, as if the years that had passed didn't matter. There's something you don't know, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she watched him carefully, trying to make sense of the situation. She had thought their story was over, that she had moved on. But now, here he was, standing in front of her again, offering her a cryptic message that seemed to hold more weight than she was ready for. What is it, David? Emma finally asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to remain composed. She wasn't sure if she wanted to know, but curiosity was beginning to overpower her caution. David hesitated, glancing away for a moment before looking back at her with a look she hadn't seen in years. It was a mix of guilt and determination, and for a split second, Emma saw the man she had once loved. He exhaled slowly, as if preparing himself for something difficult. It's about the divorce, he said. Emma frowned, her brow furrowing as she tried to process what he was saying. What about the divorce? She asked, her mind racing. I thought we were done with all of that. We were, David replied, his voice tight. But there's something I never told you. Something that changes everything. Emma's pulse quickened. She had heard a lot of things over the years about their failed marriage, from friends and family, but never anything that could truly alter her understanding of what had happened between them. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David looked down at his hands, clearly struggling with what he was about to reveal. He took a deep breath before finally speaking. The reason I left, it wasn't because of what you think. It wasn't because of the arguments, or the things that went wrong between us. Emma's eyes widened. This was not what she had expected. She had always blamed the breakdown of their marriage on the constant fighting, the miscommunication, and the things left unsaid. But now, David was telling her it wasn't the full story. Then why? Emma asked, her voice breaking slightly. Why did you leave me? David's gaze lifted, meeting hers, and for a moment, Emma saw a vulnerability in his eyes that she hadn't seen in years. Because I didn't want to put you in danger, he said quietly. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Danger? What was he talking about? What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It was never just about us, David continued. There were things happening behind the scenes that you didn't know about, things I couldn't tell you at the time. I didn't want you to get hurt. Emma's head spun. She couldn't make sense of what he was saying. What could have been so serious that David hadn't felt able to share it with her, even when they were married? She stared at him, trying to find some answers in his eyes, but all she saw was the same man who had walked away from her all those years ago, now standing in front of her with a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. Emma sat there, trying to process David's words. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of the mysterious danger he was talking about. What had he been keeping from her all these years? She had always assumed their marriage ended because of their constant arguments, their inability to communicate, and the stress of their daily lives. But now, David was suggesting there was something far bigger, something dangerous, that he had kept from her. Her thoughts swirled as she searched for the right words to ask him. What do you mean, danger? Emma finally asked, her voice shaking with a mix of disbelief and fear. David's eyes were serious, but there was a hint of sadness in them. I couldn't tell you at the time, he said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. But there were people involved, people who were dangerous, and I didn't want you to get caught in the middle of it. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Dangerous people? She had no idea what he was referring to. Her mind raced with possibilities, but none of them made sense. Why had David never mentioned anything about this before? Why had he waited until now to tell her? David, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What are you talking about? What people? What kind of danger? He looked at her for a long moment, as though weighing whether or not to tell her more. Finally, he spoke again. I was involved. In something. Something I never wanted you to know about. But it wasn't just me anymore. It affected you, too. You were in danger the entire time we were together, and I couldn't protect you from it. Emma's heart was pounding in her chest. She was struggling to understand what he was saying. All these years, she had thought their marriage had ended because of their personal issues, but now David was telling her that there was something much more serious going on behind the scenes. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice trembling. Why didn't you warn me? David lowered his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. Because I thought I could handle it. I thought I could fix everything on my own, but I couldn't. And when I realized how deep it went, I knew it was too dangerous for you to be involved in. Emma sat there in stunned silence, trying to process everything he had just said. She had always trusted David, but now, the man sitting in front of her felt like a stranger. So what now? She asked, her voice weak. Why are you telling me this now? David looked up at her, his expression unreadable. Because I can't run from it anymore. And you deserve to know the truth. David's words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of years of silence. Emma sat there, stunned, her mind trying to catch up with the reality he was laying out before her. For so long, she had blamed herself for the collapse of their marriage, convinced it was her fault, her inability to communicate, her constant second-guessing, their failure to make things work. But now, David was telling her that the real reason for their split had nothing to do with any of that. It was something far more dangerous, something she had never even imagined. David, what kind of danger are you talking about? She asked again, her voice almost breaking. The words felt foreign coming out of her mouth, but she needed to understand. She needed to know if she had been in danger all along, and if so, why he hadn't protected her. David looked at her, his expression softening for a moment before he took a deep breath. It was bigger than you think, Emma. He began slowly. There were people involved in things I didn't even fully understand at the time. I got mixed up with the wrong crowd, and by the time I realized how deep it went, I knew it was too late to fix things without putting you in harm's way. Emma felt a chill run through her. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The life she thought she had been living, safe, predictable, and calm, was suddenly a lie. All those years she had been blind to whatever had been lurking in the shadows, waiting to change everything. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Emma's voice wavered with a mixture of hurt and confusion. Why wait until now? Why let me live my life thinking everything was fine? David's eyes darkened, and he rubbed his hand over his face, clearly struggling with his own emotions. I was trying to protect you, he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. I thought I could keep you safe by staying away, by keeping you out of it. But I was wrong. I should have told you everything back then, and maybe things would have been different. Emma swallowed hard, trying to digest the whirlwind of emotions that were taking over her. What changed, David? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you telling me this now? After all these years? He hesitated, clearly torn. Because it's finally catching up to me, he said, his voice heavy. I can't run from it anymore. The people I tried to protect you from are still out there, and I need you to understand the full truth of what happened. I couldn't live with the lie anymore. You deserve to know what was really going on. Emma felt as though the ground beneath her was shifting. All the years of their marriage, of their life together, suddenly seemed like a distant memory, a facade. The man who had once been her partner, the person she had trusted with everything, was now revealing a side of himself she had never known. She stared at him, waiting for him to continue, to reveal the truths she had been denied for so long. What exactly do you want me to know, David? She asked, her voice steady, though her insides were in turmoil. David took a deep breath before answering, his next words setting the stage for the revelation she had been waiting for. David took a deep breath, his gaze never leaving Emma's as he prepared to share the truth he had kept hidden for so long. The people I'm talking about, they're part of something much bigger than you think. It's not just about me anymore. It's about everything that happened, and the things I had no control over, he said, his voice filled with regret. Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had never expected this conversation to take such a dark turn. All she had wanted was closure, to understand why their marriage had fallen apart, but now it seemed like everything she had known was just the tip of the iceberg. What do you mean, bigger? She asked, her voice low, unsure if she even wanted to hear the answer. David hesitated, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to find the right words. I got mixed up with some people, Emma. They weren't who they said they were. They promised me things that seemed too good to be true. But over time, I realized I was caught in something dangerous, something I couldn't get out of. Emma felt a chill crawl up her spine as she listened. David, the man she had married, the man she had trusted, was telling her that he had been involved with people who had put them both in danger. She couldn't wrap her head around it. But why keep it from me? Why didn't you tell me the truth when it mattered? Emma's voice cracked, her emotions threatening to spill over. David's eyes softened, filled with the weight of his own guilt. I thought I could protect you by keeping you out of it, he said quietly. I thought I could handle it on my own, but I was wrong. They got to me, Emma. They found a way in. He paused, his face troubled. And when I saw what they were capable of, I knew I had to leave. I had to get out before they hurt you. It wasn't about us anymore. It was about your safety. Emma sat in stunned silence, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always blamed herself for the failure of their marriage, but now, it seemed like David had been fighting a battle she hadn't even known about. So, what happened to these people? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David's expression hardened. They're still out there, Emma. They didn't just disappear. And they've been watching. I thought I could outrun them, but now I know I can't. He leaned forward, his eyes pleading for her to understand. I should have told you everything. I should have trusted you, but I was trying to protect you, and now it's too late. Emma felt a rush of emotions, a mix of confusion, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal. All these years, she had lived in peace, unaware of the danger lurking just beneath the surface. The man she had once trusted with her heart, with her life, had kept the truth from her for her own good, or so he thought. I don't know what to say, David, Emma replied softly, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. This changes everything. I don't know what to think anymore. David reached out, but Emma pulled back instinctively. I never wanted to hurt you, he said, his voice low, almost broken. But I didn't have a choice. Emma stared at him, trying to process everything. Her world, which had once seemed so clear, was now clouded with uncertainty. She had so many questions, but in that moment, one stood out above all the rest. What did all of this mean for her now? David sat back, running his hands through his hair in frustration. I know this is hard to understand, Emma, he said softly, his voice filled with the weight of the years that had passed. But the truth is, I never wanted to drag you into this. I thought if I stayed away you'd be safe. But now, it feels like everything is closing in on me, and on you. Emma looked at him, still struggling to piece together what he was saying. The past few minutes had completely shattered her perception of their history, of their marriage, and of David himself. She had never imagined that their life together had been tainted by secrets, let alone something as dangerous as he was describing. I don't know what to do with all of this, David, she said, her voice shaking. You've kept so much from me. I thought we had a chance to move on, but now everything feels so complicated. David looked at her with a mixture of guilt and pain. I never meant for things to get so complicated, he replied quietly. I thought I could protect you, that I could handle it. But the reality is, I was too scared. I couldn't control the situation, and I couldn't risk your safety. Emma's heart was heavy as she listened to him. She had never been one to hold on to anger, but she couldn't help feeling betrayed by the man she had loved and trusted for so long. She had spent years blaming herself for their failed marriage, thinking that it was her fault, her inadequacy that had torn them apart. But now, David was telling her that it was something else entirely. I don't understand, David, she said, the confusion evident in her voice. What was so dangerous? Why didn't you tell me anything? Why did you keep me in the dark? David exhaled slowly, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and determination. Because I thought I could handle it. I thought if I kept my distance from you, kept you away from everything, it would be safer. But I was wrong. I never should have kept you in the dark. I should have trusted you more. Emma sat in silence for a long moment, processing his words. She wanted to believe him, to understand why he had done what he did, but the hurt and betrayal she felt were overwhelming. She had spent so many years wondering what had gone wrong in their marriage, what she could have done differently. But now, she realized that the answer was far more complex than she had ever imagined. What happens now, David? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What do we do with all of this? David's expression softened, and he leaned forward, his voice gentle. I don't know what the future holds, Emma. But I'm here now, and I need you to understand that I never meant to hurt you. I've made mistakes, but I want to make things right. Emma felt a mixture of emotions swirling within her, anger, confusion, sadness, but also something else, a tiny spark of hope. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure where the future would take her, but she knew that the truth was finally out in the open. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward healing. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Emma said softly, her voice heavy with the weight of the decision she was facing. But I'm willing to listen. We'll take this one step at a time. David nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Emma. That's all I can ask for. The silence between them was thick, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel like the silence of regret. It felt like the beginning of something new, something uncertain, but perhaps, with time, something that could lead to healing. Emma wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to face it. Together or apart, she didn't know yet. But for now, they had a chance to start again. And that was enough. David and Emma sat in silence, the weight of the conversation heavy between them. The air felt thick with unspoken words, but for the first time in a long while, it was a silence that didn't feel suffocating. It wasn't comfortable, not by any means, but there was a sense of understanding, a recognition that they had finally crossed the line they had spent years avoiding. David cleared his throat, breaking the quiet. I know I can't expect you to just forgive me, Emma. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. His voice was raw, and Emma could hear the sincerity in it. It was a stark contrast to the man who had walked out of her life years ago without a word, without explanation. I'm not asking for that, Emma replied softly. I'm not sure what I feel right now. I'm angry, and I'm confused. But I'm not sure I'm ready to shut the door completely. David nodded, relief flashing briefly in his eyes. I don't want to push you, Emma. I just want a chance to show you that I'm not the same person I was before. I made mistakes. A lot of them. But I'm trying to fix them. For you, for us, if that's even possible. Emma looked at him, searching his face for any sign of deception, but all she saw was vulnerability. It was strange seeing David like this. He had always been the strong, confident one, the one who held everything together. Now, he was just a man who had made mistakes and was desperately trying to make amends. I don't know if things can ever be the same again, Emma said quietly, the weight of her words sinking in. I don't know if I can trust you like I did before. David's face fell, but he didn't argue. Instead, he just nodded. I understand. And I'll be patient, Emma. I won't rush you. The truth was, Emma didn't know what she wanted. She didn't know if she could go back to the life they once had, or if the damage was too deep to ever heal. But for the first time in years, she felt like there was a chance for something. Not a perfect future, not a quick fix, but a possibility. The possibility that they could move forward, even if it meant starting from scratch. I don't know where we go from here, Emma whispered, her voice thick with emotion. But I'm willing to find out. I just need time. David gave her a small, understanding smile. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, whenever you're ready. It was strange, this feeling that had settled in Emma's chest. It wasn't just the heaviness of the conversation, but something else, something that had been missing for a long time. Hope. She wasn't sure where it would lead, or how it would unfold, but for the first time in a while, she was willing to see where it could go. Whatever happened next, Emma knew one thing for sure, the truth had finally been spoken. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward healing. Slowly, carefully, she stood up from the couch, her heart beating faster than it had in a long time. I need to go for a walk, she said, her voice calm but firm. I need some air. David stood up with her, but he didn't press. He simply nodded, understanding the need for space. I'll wait for you, Emma. Take all the time you need. As she walked toward the door, Emma paused, her hand on the knob. She turned back to him. Thank you, she said, her voice soft. For being honest with me. David's eyes softened. Thank you for listening. With that, Emma stepped outside, the cool night air greeting her as she closed the door behind her. It wasn't the end of their story, but it was a beginning. And for now, that was enough. The cool night air wrapped around Emma as she stepped outside, her breath visible in the chill. The quiet of the street, the soft rustling of leaves in the trees, helped clear her mind as she walked slowly down the sidewalk. She needed this time, away from David, away from the overwhelming emotions that had clouded her thoughts for so long. The truth he had shared was heavy, and though it was a relief to finally know, it also left her with more questions than answers. What was she supposed to do with this new knowledge? How could she reconcile the man she had once loved with the man standing in front of her now, a man burdened by secrets, a man who had kept so much from her? As she walked, her thoughts drifted back to their marriage, to the good times they had shared before everything had fallen apart. She remembered the laughter, the plans they had made for the future, the way he had held her when the world felt too heavy. Those memories had been clouded by the years of pain and confusion, but now, she was beginning to see them in a new light. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't entirely gone. Maybe there was something left worth saving. But how could she move forward with David? How could she trust him again after everything he had kept from her? Emma's mind raced, and the questions only seemed to multiply the further she walked. She stopped at a park bench, the weight of everything suddenly too much to carry. Sitting down, she leaned her elbows on her knees and closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The silence was comforting, but it wasn't enough to quiet her thoughts. She needed more time to process, to understand what she wanted and needed. She had been so sure of her life, her independence, her peace, but now everything felt uncertain. Could she ever trust David again? Could she forgive him for what he had done, for keeping the truth from her for so long? The sound of footsteps approaching interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see David walking toward her, his figure illuminated by the streetlights. He didn't speak immediately, just stopped a few feet away, giving her space. His expression was one of concern, but there was also a softness in his eyes that made her heart ache. She hadn't expected him to come after her, but there he was, waiting for her to say something. Anything. Emma stood up slowly, wiping her palms on her jeans. "I didn't expect you to follow me," she said, her voice shaky. David took a cautious step forward. "I just wanted to give you space, but I couldn't leave without knowing that you're okay," he said quietly. Emma met his gaze, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. She wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the hurt, but part of her wanted to trust him, to believe that the man standing before her now was the man she had once loved. "I don't know what to do, David," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't know how to move past this, how to trust you again. I'm so confused." David nodded, his face filled with understanding. "I know, Emma. And I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I know I can't undo the past, but I can try to make the future better." Emma looked at him, the words settling in her heart. It wasn't going to be easy, and she didn't know if it would work, but there was something in David's voice, in the way he was looking at her, that made her believe he was sincere. Maybe they could start again, maybe they couldn't, but for now, she was willing to try. "I need time," she said softly, her heart still unsure. "I need time to think, to figure out what I want." David's expression softened, and he nodded. "I understand, Emma. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting for you, whenever you're ready." She didn't know what the future held, but as she stood there in the quiet of the night, with David waiting for her, she felt like for the first time in a long time, she had a choice. And that choice, for now, was to take one step forward, one step at a time. With that, she turned and started walking back toward the apartment, David following behind her at a distance, allowing her the space she needed. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Emma felt like she was no longer walking alone. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty, but also with a strange sense of peace. Emma had never imagined that taking a step back would help her so much, but with each passing day, she felt herself getting a little clearer on what she wanted. The walk she had taken that night had given her the space she needed to think, to breathe, and to process everything she had learned. David, for his part, had respected her need for time. He hadn't pressured her, hadn't pushed for answers, and that had made all the difference. It was strange, really, how the absence of pressure could make everything feel more manageable. Emma spent her days focusing on herself, something she hadn't done in years. She went to the gym, caught up on reading, and spent time with friends who had been there for her through the ups and downs. Slowly, the confusion began to clear. The truth David had revealed, though shocking, had given her the clarity she needed to see the situation for what it truly was. She wasn't the victim of some grand conspiracy. She was simply a woman who had been in love with someone who made mistakes, mistakes that affected them both. The more she thought about it, the more Emma realized that her feelings for David hadn't disappeared. They were still there, deep down, and maybe, just maybe, they could be rebuilt. But it wasn't going to happen overnight. It wasn't going to be easy. There were still many things they needed to work through, many things they needed to talk about, but the idea of starting over didn't seem so impossible anymore. One evening, as Emma sat in her living room, scrolling through a book on the coffee table, she heard a knock at the door. She knew it was David before she even stood up. It had become a quiet ritual, The way he would show up to check on her, to give her space, and to remind her that he was still there. She opened the door and found him standing on the other side, looking as he always did, sincere, a little uncertain, but willing to try. "Hey," he said softly, his voice carrying a hint of hope. "Can I come in?" Emma smiled, a small but genuine smile, and stepped aside. "Of course," she replied. He walked in, and for a moment they stood in the living room, either knowing quite what to say. Emma could feel the weight of the moment, the unspoken words between them. She had spent so many years not knowing how to handle the silence, but now it felt different. It felt like something was finally shifting. "I've been thinking," Emma said, her voice steady. "I think I'm ready to talk. Really talk." David looked at her, his expression softening. "I'm ready too," he said quietly. And so, they sat down together, not with all the answers, but with a shared understanding. They knew that the road ahead would be long, that there would be hard conversations, and moments of doubt. But for the first time in a long time, they were willing to face it together. Emma didn't know where it would lead, but she knew one thing for sure: the future was theirs to decide. Together or apart, they would find a way to move forward. And that, in itself, was a beginning.